My father chose my stepbrother as his successor. I built a rival empire and crushed them. The boardroom of Vance & Sons Catering, with its view of the Chicago River, had always smelled of my childhood, lemon polish, my father's cologne, and the faint, ever-present aroma of roasted garlic and ambition. That day, it just smelled of betrayal. My father, Robert Vance, sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his hands steepled. To his right, beaming with a practiced, empty charm, was my stepbrother, Julian. I, Nathan Vance, sat to his left, the carefully prepared expansion report for our corporate division sitting unopened before me. The future of this company, my father began, his voice the same baritone that had once read me bedtime stories, requires vision. Charisma. A face that can woo the downtown skyscrapers and the North Shore society weddings alike. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. For 12 years, since I was 16, I'd worked in this company. I'd scrubbed industrial pans, negotiated with truculent farmers at 4 a.m. at the Fulton Market, redesigned our logistics to cut waste by 22%, and personally salvaged the Palmer House account when Julian had mismanaged the menu and insulted the event planner. I was the engine in the kitchen, Julian was the glossy paint on the limousine. After careful consideration, my father continued, refusing to meet my eyes, the board and I have decided to appoint Julian as CEO, effective immediately. His strengths in client relations and brand vision are precisely what Vance & Sons needs for its next chapter. Brand vision. The phrase was a joke. Julian's vision was copying trends from New York magazines and spending exorbitant amounts on flashy marketing videos that featured him prominently. He was a socialite who happened to work here, beloved by my father for his easy smile and his resemblance to my father's second wife, Celia. And my role? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. You'll be Chief Operations Officer, reporting to Julian, my father said, as if bestowing a gift. Your operational expertise is invaluable, Nathan. We need that solid foundation. Reporting to Julian. The man who thought profit and loss was a yoga position. The man who had nearly lost us the university contract by trying to serve deconstructed tiramisu to football boosters. Father, I said, the word tasting like ash. The corporate expansion plan I've developed, it's based on data, on relationships I've built. The mid-tier tech firms, the healthcare networks, they don't want champagne fountains and caviar bumps. They want reliable, innovative, nutritious food for their employees. That's the growth market. Julian waved a dismissive hand. Nathan, that's cafeteria work. It's beneath the Vance & Sons brand. We're about experience, about luxury. We need to be chasing Fortune 500 galas, not Silicon Valley salad bars. My father nodded in agreement. Julian understands the brand. That was the moment the last thread of hope snapped. He didn't see the business. He saw a stage for his favored son. The legacy my grandfather had built from a single food truck, a legacy of grit, flavor, and feeding people well, was being traded for canapes and clout. I understand, I said, standing. The room seemed to tilt. Then my operational expertise is no longer available. I resign. My father's face flushed with shock and anger. Don't be dramatic, Nathan. This is a family business. You have a responsibility here. It stopped being my family business the moment you decided it was his vanity project, I said, my gaze locking with his. For a second, I saw a flicker of something, doubt, maybe even fear, but it was quickly smothered by paternal imperiousness. If you walk out that door, you walk out on your inheritance, he said coldly. You'll get the minimum trust your grandfather stipulated, nothing more. The trust. A lump sum from Grandpa Vance, left for each grandchild, inaccessible until 25. Mine had just matured. It was a modest $250,000. To Julian, it was pocket money. To me, It was a war chest. Keep it, I said, the lie giving me a surge of bitter strength. I wanted no part of his poisoned gift. But I knew the law, the trust was mine, from my mother's father. He couldn't touch it. I don't need your money. I walked out of the boardroom, past the framed photos of my grandfather with his food truck, of my father shaking hands with mayors. I didn't go to my office. I went straight to the kitchen, to Carlos, my head chef and friend for a decade. His face fell when he saw mine. "Chief?" he asked. "It's Julian's kitchen now, Carlos," I said, my voice thick. "Take care of the crew." He looked at me, then at the pristine knife roll I kept in my locker. He gave a single, grave nod. "Where you go, some of us may follow. When you are ready." I drove to my apartment, a functional place near the loop. The silence was deafening. The anger was a living thing, a cold fire in my veins. But anger alone wouldn't build anything. It had to be forged into purpose. That night, I dug out my grandfather's old business plan, handwritten on yellowed legal paper. His philosophy was simple, circled at the top: feed the people in front of you. Do it right. The rest follows. Vance and Sons had forgotten that. They were trying to feed an image. My target wouldn't be the glitzy galas. It would be the very market Julian sneered at, the everyday corporate world. The tech startups burning the midnight oil, the hospital staff with 10-minute breaks, the small law firms tired of soggy deli sandwiches. I would build a company not on brand, but on bedrock: reliability, innovation, and quality. I incorporated as Anchor Culinary Solutions. My headquarters was a rented commissary kitchen in a no-frills industrial park. It was stark, stainless steel, and smelled of cleaning solvent, not nostalgia. It was perfect. With my trust fund, at least 2 refrigerated vans. I called Carlos. He brought 2 line cooks, Marcos and Lena, who were twins in their talent and their disdain for Julian's foam and fairy dust cuisine. We were 4 people against an institution. Our first client was a struggling biotech firm, NextGene, that Vance and Sons had recently dropped for not meeting their new minimum event spend. I met the office manager, a perpetually stressed woman named Sarah. I didn't bring a glossy brochure. I brought a sample box, a sustainably sourced chicken banh mi with crunchy, quick pickled veggies, a farro salad with roasted seasonal vegetables and a zesty lemon tahini dressing, and a dark chocolate avocado mousse. Simple, bold flavors, packed with energy. "How much?" Sarah asked, her mouth still full of banh mi. I quoted a price 30% below what Vance and Sons had charged for their inferior, generic boxed lunches. "And if we have a last-minute all-hands meeting for 50 people tomorrow, we'll be there," I said. "That's the anchor. We hold fast." She signed a 6-month contract. We killed ourselves for that contract. Cooking all night, packing at dawn, delivering through traffic. But we did it. The food was perfect, on time, every time. Sarah told a friend at a neighboring architectural firm. They called. Then a small physical therapy chain. We weren't stealing Vance and Sons' crown jewels. We were quietly picking up the scraps they disdainfully brushed from their table. But I knew these scraps. I knew the people who ran these businesses. They were like me, pragmatic, hard-working, undervalued. 6 months in, I got a call from a blocked number. "Nathan." It was my father. His voice was stiff. "I hear you're in the food service business." "I am." "Don't make this a personal vendetta. There's room for both of us." "Is there?" I replied. "Julian said my market was beneath the brand. I'm just staying out of your way." He hung up. The first probe had been deflected. The next 2 years were a blur of sweat, strategy, and silent growth. Anchor Culinary lived by a code my grandfather would have recognized: under-promise, over-deliver. We developed a proprietary software for ordering and menu customization that was simple and intuitive, light years ahead of Vance & Sons' fax and email system. We sourced locally and vertically, building relationships with farms that gave us better produce at lower costs, cutting out Julian's bloated middlemen. We didn't have a sales team. We had me, in a simple chef's coat, and our food. We targeted companies that had been burned by Vance & Sons' rising prices and Julian's increasing unreliability. A whispering campaign started in the procurement circles: if you want a show, call Vance. If you want your people fed, call Anchor. Our first major blow came from the Northwestern Memorial Satellite Clinic account. It was a solid, mid-sized contract Vance & Sons had held for years. The head of facilities, a no-nonsense former Army quartermaster named Mr. Henderson, called me. "Vance is raising prices by 20%, he grumbled. "Says it's for a brand refinement. My nurses don't need refinement. They need protein at 3 a.m. Can you do it?" We could. We did. We designed a 24/7 nourishing menu for shift workers, with hot meals available around the clock, not just during bankers' hours. When we won the contract, it was our first real toe-to-toe victory. It sent a shockwave through the mid-market. Julian's response was not operational improvement. It was aggression. He started a smear campaign, suggesting to clients that Anchor used inferior, non-union labor. We didn't. We paid better, and questionable ingredients. We had more transparent sourcing than anyone. It reeked of desperation. My father called me to lunch. It was at the Chicago Athletic Club, a bastion of old money. He looked older, the lines on his face deeper. "You're hurting the family, Nathan." "I'm running a business, Robert," I said, using his first name. The flinch was minute but satisfying. "Julian is struggling. This competition, it's unseemly. A merger. We bring Anchor into Vance & Sons. You run operations. Julian remains the public face. The family wins." It was the same old deal, repackaged. My labor for his glory? "No," I said, signaling for the check. "Anchor isn't for sale. Especially not to a failing brand." His composure broke. "You arrogant ingrate. After everything I've given you. You gave me a kitchen to clean," I said, standing. "I built my own. I'm not finished yet." The war was now open. Julian, panicking as more mid-tier clients defected, made a catastrophic error. To maintain the illusion of growth and fund his extravagant marketing, he began cutting corners. He swapped out the premium beef for commodity grade, the wild-caught salmon for farmed. He fired experienced, higher-paid chefs for cheaper labor. The heart of the business, the food, began to rot. Complaints soared. A high-profile wedding at the Art Institute ended in a dozen cases of food poisoning traced to undercooked poultry. The social media storm was brutal. The Tribune's food critic, who had long been kind to the Vance name, wrote a devastating piece titled, "A Legacy Spoiled? Has Vance & Sons Lost Its Recipe?" Meanwhile, Anchor was thriving. We used our profitability to invest in a state-of-the-art central kitchen. We hired more talent, including a brilliant dietitian who helped us land a coveted contract with a premier corporate wellness network. We were no longer a scrappy upstart. We were the reliable, innovative leader in a market they had ignored. The phone calls from my father became more frequent, more strained. They were no longer commands or offers of merger. They were requests for truce, for consultation. I stopped taking them. The final domino was the Chicago Metropolitan Bank account. It was Vance & Sons' oldest corporate client, a symbol of their institutional reach. The bank's CFO was a data-driven man named David Chen. I requested a meeting. I didn't bring food. I brought a binder. It contained a side-by-side analysis, Vance and Sons' rising costs and declining quality metrics over 5 years, versus Anchor consistent pricing, quality scores, and client retention rates. It had graphs of their employee satisfaction surveys mentioning declining lunch quality. "I'm not selling you food, Mr. Chen," I said. "I'm selling you stability, predictability, and a return on your investment in employee morale. Your current vendor is a reputational risk." Chen studied the binder for a long time. "The board has a personal relationship with Robert Vance." "I'm sure they do," I said. "But are they running a charity or a bank?" 2 weeks later, Anchor Culinary Solutions was awarded the 5-year, multi-million-dollar contract. It was the death knell. The fall of Vance and Sons was not a dramatic explosion, it was a slow, airless deflation. The loss of the bank account triggered loan covenant violations. Vendors, long unpaid due to Julian's cash flow mismanagement, put them on cash-only terms. The board, finally seeing through the charisma to the hollow core, demanded Julian's resignation. My father, in a last-ditch effort, came back as interim CEO, but the rot was too deep. The brand was toxic, the debt was crippling. 18 months after losing the bank, Vance and Sons Catering filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The assets, the brand name, the remaining client contracts, the riverfront office lease, the kitchen equipment were to be sold at auction. The bankruptcy court was a cold, echoing space. My father was there, sitting with his lawyer, a shell of the imposing figure he once was. He looked shrunken inside his expensive overcoat. Julian was nowhere to be seen. Rumor was he'd taken what cash he could and moved to Miami. I walked in with my lawyer and CFO. My father's head snapped up. The look on his face was a complex tapestry of hatred, shame, and a dawning, horrific understanding. The auction was a formality. There were no other serious bidders for the carcass of a failed catering company. Anchor Culinary Solutions, through a shell holding company, acquired the physical assets, the trucks, the kitchen equipment, the office furniture for less than 20 cents on the dollar. The Vance and Sons name was not purchased. I let it die. It wasn't a legacy anymore, it was a warning label. After the gavel fell, I walked over to him. The air between us was frigid. "Satisfied?" he croaked, his eyes bloodshot. "No," I said, and I meant it. There was no satisfaction, only a grim, weary finality. This wasn't about satisfaction. This was about proving you were wrong. About every single thing. He tried to muster his old authority. "You destroyed your grandfather's legacy." "You did that when you handed it to a hollow man," I replied, my voice low. Grandpa's legacy wasn't a brand name or a boardroom. It was in the food. It was in the work. I saved that legacy. It's in my kitchens right now. It's called Anchor. I turned to leave. "Nathan." The cry was stripped bare, the voice of a lost old man. What should I do?" I paused, but didn't look back. "I don't know, Robert. That's not my problem to solve anymore." The integration was swift. We moved our expanding operations into their old flagship kitchen, a far superior facility. We painted over the Vance and Sons sign on the door, replacing it with the simple, sturdy Anchor logo, a stylized ship's anchor. Some of the old Vance staff, the true craftsmen and women, applied for jobs. We hired them, eagerly. Carlos, now my VP of Culinary, welcomed them back to a kitchen where the only priority was the food. One afternoon, a few months after the acquisition, I was in what used to be my father's office. I'd replaced the heavy, imposing desk with a large, communal work table. The walls, once covered in photos of my father with dignitaries, were now covered in maps of our local farm partnerships and growth charts. My assistant buzzed. "Mr. Vance, there's a Robert Vance here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." A long silence. Send him in. He entered slowly. He looked at the room, at the utter erasure of his presence, and his shoulders slumped. The bluster was completely gone. I came to, he struggled, to ask if there might be a place. As a consultant, I know the old client histories, some of the older contacts. He was begging, just as the industry had begged him for quality at the end. The circle was complete. I looked at him, this man who had defined so much of my life through his rejection. I felt the old, cold fire, but it was banked now, its energy spent. Revenge had built Anchor, but it would not run it. Anchor has a policy, I said, my voice even. We only hire people who believe in the core mission, to feed the people in front of us, to do it right. We judge people by their work, not their name or their charm. I met his gaze. Based on your recent work, Robert, I'm afraid you are not a cultural fit. We're not hiring. The color drained from his face. It was the ultimate rejection, delivered in the language of the business he'd prized above me. He gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod, and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I turned my chair to face the window, the same window he'd once looked out of, seeing an empire. I saw the river, constant and flowing, and the city beyond, full of people who needed to be fed. I picked up the phone and dialed Carlos. Chief. Carlos. The menu for the new children's hospital wing. Let's make sure the recovery smoothies are perfect. And send the overage from the farm order to the Southside Community Kitchen, like we discussed. S.I., Chief. On it. I hung up. The ghost was gone. The kitchen hummed with purpose below me. The anchor was set. The real work, my grandfather's work, could finally continue.